I believe this might be your first time on our campus. Could you give us your feedback on how it's been for you on campus here at SIB in Pune?
Oh, it's been a very nice experience. In my opening remarks, I think it's still in my mind. You know, the where your location is currently. I mean, it's quite beautiful. I was just talking to Apoorv on the way in, and he's like, I don't know how people can study here, right? I mean, you're sitting there and you have a fantastic view. I think you've picked a very nice location for that. Very nice campus. I was quite impressed with the way things are done, and looking forward to having more interactions with you and your team.
That's great. Thank you so much. So, when you were at university at New Haven, what was your experience like when you did your MBA? What was it like?
It was a great experience. I mean, even till today, a lot of people ask me if you go back in either your career or your academic life, what were the best years of your life? I would say my university lives were by far the best years of my life. Not because of anything unusual. It's just the entire setting of it, the experience, sharing a lot of your wisdom and your knowledge, or just experience in general with various students. The interaction in itself is quite a great experience. Dr. Raman was telling me when he was introducing himself to us that the way the SIBM campus is set up, you have the students and they have to reside on it, which I'm very supportive of. I had the same experience in the US as well. Prior to that, I always lived the life of a day scholar. In school, I was only went during regular hours, came back home in the evening. But I think there's a lot more to learn within the university experiences.
Yes, with the college.
The whole life revolves around the students. Right. Everything is built for the students. It caters to the student, and I think that in itself is a wonderful experience. The fact that outside of your regular hours, you have the infrastructure around it. The dining room, you have a library, and everything is there to facilitate it. So I think it just makes our life a lot more easier. And especially in India, you don't want to be commuting back and forth. That would kill 4 hours of your day, and as a student, it's very precious. So yeah, coming back to my experience as a student, I think it was very, very enriching. Something I would encourage everyone, including my own. I have a 6-year-old daughter, to do the same thing, whether it's part of an Indian university or any university for that matter. I'm a big proponent of having them experience the full life.
Including the hostel experience.
Including the hostel experience. I completely agree. The other thing that I even touched upon is you make your best friends in university. I completely believe in that. I mean, people and friends that you may meet or make after, once you've graduated and working, yeah, they're friends, but I don't think they're as close as the ones you make in university. So it's a very good experience.
Okay. So, you were a young finance professional when you joined Deloitte. So, could you give us your experience as over there? How was it for you as a young professional?
There's two sides of it, right? There is the excitement of being a part of a new organization, a part of a new group. It was my very first job after I'd moved to Canada as well. So there was a bit of an adjustment factor there, but that was not so bad. So the good side of it is really more the experience, the excitement, learning something new, meeting new people. That's always there. The not so good side was really, I would say, something that's of a personal choice. And what I mean by that is work-life balance. Now, typically in most finance jobs, and I tell most of my peers and colleagues even here, when you're young, and typically, at least in the old days, with your traditional corporate finance, investment banking jobs, are very grueling. There's very long hours. You're working 80 to 100 hours a week, sometimes even weekends, because that's the nature of the beast. Especially when it's a boom time in the economy. Deals are just flowing left, right, and center, and you're expected to live up to it. So I would say that was probably the not so great experience of that life. But then that's the nature of the beast. You get used to it, you're compensated for it, so it's a personal choice. If you think that lifestyle works for you, great. It does change ultimately when your family grows. So when you do get married and you have children, I don't think that's a lifestyle you can work with. So that's something I'd probably recommend for people who are young, freshly out of MBA. It's a good experience to have, and then take that and maybe think about how you want to develop in your career after that.
Okay. So, you spent 5 years as Vice President Global Operations and Finance at TD Securities. What would you say was the most challenging part of that in your opinion?
Challenging part, there were two things. One was really the learning aspect of it. And I remember Mr. Suresh Sahu in the earlier meeting was talking about change.
Yes.
And adapting to that change. I think that was something that was perhaps the first challenge that I had there. And mainly because it was a new group, it was a very small team initially. It was myself and the gentleman who was my boss who ultimately hired me to kind of build up the team and go from there. And our overall scope was initially limited to the loan portfolio, doing all the slicing, dicing analysis and stuff like that. And then we had to build a team. Ultimately, we grew a team, I think just under 15 people. Not a very large size, but getting to that stage. So that I'd say is my first challenge. The second challenge I would say is growing through the ranks. You know, when I joined that group 5 years earlier, I was an analyst, a senior analyst manager, and then ultimately vice president. I think growing through that, it is, every promotion brings a new set of challenges because you have new responsibilities. There are bigger expectations from you. And I think part of everyone's career is to take it into stride, adopt to those changes, and then try and demonstrate that, you can do it, and you're ready for the next challenge. So I would say there are probably the two challenges as part of the career.
So, in your opinion, a young finance professional, what kind of skill sets should they hone to become a successful risk analyst?
That's a very broad question, but I can answer it in a generic sense. Financial analysis, depending on what you do, there are many applications of it. So if I can reflect on my own experiences as I grew up as an analyst in corporate finance, investment banking, if you look at if I were to draw a pie chart of the time spent in a typical day or in a typical deal, I would say maybe 60% of the time spent is doing research. So you need to have the skills to do research efficiently. And you need to have the expertise on basic tools. I'm not saying you need to be an expert on finding companies. There are a lot of different applications out there that help you get the information. Some of the typical things would be Bloomberg skills, just so that you can get basic access to financial information, whether it's Bloomberg, Reuters, and so many other databases out there. It's entirely up to the company that's using them. But certain tools have the ability to do research. And research can be the ability to do company research, industry research, financial statement analysis research. So 60% of the time I would say is spent in doing that kind of research. 20% is probably on analysis, so actual analysis. And again, in Aris world, in my current role now, the guys spend a lot of time doing analysis of the portfolio, slicing and dicing of the what we call credit exposure numbers, or derivative loan equivalent, as we call it in Credit Suisse. You need to know what are the drivers, what is moving that, why did the exposure move from A to B, or if you're in your traditional corporate finance role, yes, if you're trying to explain historical statements, you need to understand what are the key drivers of revenue, key drivers of income, typical line items on the balance sheet, what are the debt levels, what kind of capital structure are there. So I'd say that 20% of the time is spent in doing the analysis of the numbers. Then maybe 10 to 15% of the time in actually writing. Now, whether that is in the form of what we call an information memorandum, where you're doing a pitch for that particular company, doing presentations like I just discussed about earlier, presenting to your management, your capital committees, credit risk management, whatever it may be, just so that you need to convince them that it's a good deal for the company to invest in. Or even if you're in the front office, you would spend a lot of time writing to potential investors, other banking partners, loan syndications, the various aspects of it. And I think maybe the remaining 5% or 10% that's left is in your actual verbal communication. You know, participating in a deal financing, trashing out a particular deal, or even in our current role, getting to room with different people, or working with other stakeholders, other partners, trying to understand or get a little bit more information. What are the drivers for this change? What particularly happened? Get some insight on their expertise on what are the other pieces of a deal. But that I'd say is probably the way you spend a life, and that's maybe the way you should focus your efforts in terms of skill sets, analysis skill, financial statement analysis, and the tools to do that. I mean, in most people it's Excel, Access, depending on how much volumes of data that you're dealing with. Those are probably the most common tools. There are other proprietary tools depending on the industry, but that you can typically learn on the job. I wouldn't say that's something you need to know.
So you mentioned writing as an important skill, and earlier you were discussing communication in the aspects of interviews and presentations. So when it comes to writing skills, would you have one or two quick pointers that you could share in specific context to finance, then for our finance?
See, in finance, again, I come back to the 2 points that I mentioned there. One is know your audience. So who are you writing this memo to? Who are you writing this pitch for? Is this going to senior executives? Is it going to a lawyer? Is it going to an accountant? Is it going to a junior analyst? You need to really know that, because that will give you context on how much information you need to put. There's no point in you investing time in writing a whole story. If it's a senior executive, they don't have the time, they don't care. They just want what is the gist of it. And that was one thing I was told as I was being groomed as an analyst and associate, be very specific. We were told, and even a lot of our credit memos, a lot of our recommendations, it was all in bulleted form. They didn't want essays and sagas, and it's not about grammar, it's not about punctuation, it's about tell me what are the key issues of this company, what is the nature of the transaction, why do you think it makes sense, how much money are we putting, those kind of things. And it should not be more than a couple of pages. Don't put in information if you don't have to. It's a waste of your time, it's a waste of the other person's time. I would say those are probably two main skills.
Okay. So, in your opinion, a lot of people are looking at doing a CFA after the MBA degree. How relevant would you say that really is? Is it broad-based or in specific fields? Maybe?
It's specific. Now again, unfortunately, a lot of people have asked me that within an Indian context, and I can speak to some of it, but in general, a CFA is useful or is valued in specific areas of banking, right? And most of investment banking, or say portfolio management. If you are in investment banking, if you're in corporate finance, if you're in corporate lending or corporate credit, or equity research, or any research for that matter, debt research, equity research, I would say those are the main areas that CFA is very valued. Any other areas of finance, it's a nice to have, but if you already have an MBA, it's probably overkill. That's maybe the best way to do it. So if you think you want to pursue a career specifically in front office investment banking, equity research, or any credit research for that matter, I would say pursue an MBA. It makes sense. Otherwise, an MBA or an MBA finance should be apt if you're doing your traditional, whether it's marketing, economics, finance, or some people have a master's in finance. If you have a master's in finance, it's really overkill. There's no point in doing CFA. I know here in general people try to rack up degrees and certifications. You should really think about it. If it's, it takes a lot of time to do it. It's 3 years assuming you clear every level successfully to do a CFA. Or actually, no, you can do level 1 or level 2 in 1 year. So maybe a minimum of 2 years. So you really got to think about it and the costs associated with it, right? I would say if you think you are heading toward that career and it's relevant, then we do a CFA. Otherwise, maybe channel your efforts on building some other skill sets.
Great, thank you. With global organizations going global, risk management is becoming about a lot of things. It's about resources, it's about stakeholders, it's about people. So how do you manage such a diverse portfolio?
To be honest, in India, it's all about people management and workflow management, right? So like I said, I was shocked when I first moved to India and my boss told me, you have a team of about 25 now and it's going to go to potentially 100. For me, it was quite an eye-opener. But then in India, it's a numbers game. I think in general, in most organizations, a VP and above would have at least 50 or 75 people and above. And the nature of work in India, whether it's an outsourced model or a captive model, or generally value-added processes, whether it's in banking, finance, manufacturing, or whatever sector it may be, I think a lot of it is to do with managing the workflow, managing people. It's getting less about us, actually driving how risk management should be run or how risk management should be implemented.
Okay, okay.
For us, all the direction comes from our on-site location. So most multinational corporations, as Suresh was saying, they would come from the top. The direction is from the leaders. They say that's the way it is to be done, that's the way it is to be implemented. Locally, you may have very specific nuances to address local challenges, but it's by no means, let's say, me or my boss driving how risk management of the company should be done.
Okay.
It's all about us taking the orders, managing the ship, managing the workflow, and that's the nature of the beast in India. Outside of India, it is different, yes. If you are located in within the headquarters, so yeah, I mean this would apply to Indian companies that are domiciled here, have their headquarters here, then a lot of it would be implemented here, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But then, at least from a multinational context, a lot of decisions are made outside or on-site. And if you want to be a part of such strategic direction, then you would have to move, I keep saying headquarters, whether it's in India or abroad.
Right.
If that's the way you want to go, you have to move closer to the headquarters.
Okay. So how do you believe that risk analytics as a field is going to evolve over the coming next few years, let's say 5 years?
It's getting more and more complicated. It's probably the easiest way to say it. And, I know Apurva will share my same thoughts as well, especially for banks in the European setting, whether it's Credit Suisse, Deutsche, the Barclays, all the European banks. The biggest challenge today is pleasing regulators. The regulators are coming very hard on all the banks. Obviously, this is a direct outcome of the Lehman crisis and all the other crises that we've had, the various scandals, the LIBOR scandal, and the various shenanigans of accountings and stuff like that that's been happening. A direct result of that is regulators getting more and more hard on the banks, getting them to do more work, being more transparent, and if not, they're going to come down very hard on them in terms of the capital requirements, which is where it hurts the banks. So at least in the last 2 years, at least in my experience with Credit Suisse, our work has just become so driven by regulators. I sometimes ask myself, am I working for Credit Suisse or am I working for the regulators? That's how it's just become. My book of work is largely regulatory driven, and it's given the first priority. Everything else is what we call BAU, or business as usual. That takes a low priority order, and that may be deferred substantially if there is too much happening from the regulatory perspective. So yeah, coming back to your question, I think it's getting more and more complicated, more so for Credit Suisse because we operate in several jurisdictions, and we are getting requirements from all the regulators. Our primary regulators right now we call FINMA, which is the Swiss regulator. We have the PRA, which is the UK regulator. Each of them have their own rules, each of them have their own requirements, and accordingly, we've adapted in having separate teams for separate regulators. Now in the US, we're having what we call the ANC, Alternative Net Capital, is the next big thing now, at least for Credit Suisse. So it's a third regulator now that we have to add. It makes our life complicated because it's no longer a very simple analysis or a simple validation. You have to think, who's the regulator? How does he measure his exposure or his capital? And we need to effectively have our resources trained to understand all the methodologies now. So it is multiple profiles of the same counterparty that we need to analyze and comment on. And I only think it's going to get worse, at least for the next little while, until things stabilize and until the banks get their act together, get their balance sheet comfortable enough that the regulators say, okay, I'm okay now. Now you can do what you have to do. So the focus has really been on stabilizing the capital structure. It's been little about growing the top line. As you can see, most banks are now shedding unprofitable businesses or shedding businesses that are capital intensive. There is just no appetite for that right now. We have to focus on conserving capital. If this business doesn't make enough sense from a return standpoint, as you can see, Credit Suisse has had a lot of losses in the fixed income world, and it's all public now. You can see information that has been, we have shed losses, there's been a lot of churn, but that's the nature of the beast. That's the way the regulators are driving our business right now, and I think that's probably going to be the way forward.
And while you were at Credit Suisse, could you tell us maybe a challenging situation, perhaps different from the regulatory challenges that you faced, something that you've had?
For
to
me
think about?
personally, it's been, I would say, people management.
All right.
People management, maybe a little bit of a cultural change, because my work experience prior to Credit Suisse has always been in North America. It's a different culture there.
Right.
It's a different, the level of maturity and professionalism is different there. I'm not saying it's bad over here, but there is still a way to go. I mean, India has come a long way from what it used to be. Like I said, we have very bright and talented young minds in our organization, but they just need the grooming. They need that initial hand-holding, you know, so these topics about communication, soft skills is very relevant in the Indian context. And that, I think, has been the biggest challenge, at least from my perspective. It's not necessarily about the work. I mean, to be honest, my prior experience or my prior work life has little context in what I currently do in India. In India, like I said, it's all about managing people, it's all about management. I have very talented people who will do the job, who understand what needs to be done. For me, it's to support them, help them through any operational issues, do the face-off with the stakeholder, manage any escalations. It's all about that kind of aspect more than having to leverage off my prior experience or what I've done historically. It's really more understanding people here, understanding their kind of challenges and their growth and motivations, helping them to do what you can. I think it's really more, I would say the challenge is more cultural, maybe cultural setting, and then people management.
Okay. So we have a finance badge, obviously, specializing in finance here. How does an MBA in finance really decide what stream or what kind of work they would like to do once they get up? How would you advise them to go about it?
Two things, right? One is, it comes back to research. Okay, first you need to find out what is really out there, right, in an organization. What are the various roles that are available for any graduate that you can pursue. The second thing is really probably more important, what you as an individual like, what do you want to do? And I always believe, and I tell a lot of my peers or my juniors, that follow your passion. I completely believe in that. Money will follow. I know even Suresh was mentioning, and he's very true when he said changes in decision, especially as you go more and more senior, is less about money. It's more about, is this the right company for me? Is this the right choice for me in improving my career, improving my profile, building on my skill sets? It becomes more of that. So I think in this context, I think a person has to choose between what they like to do, and then apply that in a particular role. So if you are heavy into finance, you like number crunching, you like analysis, okay, there are many applications for you. As an MBA, you need to think, first of all, which industry you'd like to apply, because those can be applied in all industries. And then maybe within that industry, is there any particular vertical or any particular sector that interests you, and you should focus. And again, I come back to Suresh's topic. To the extent you should choose your company, that should be the way forward. And the best way to do that is really do your research, understand what a company does, what is its product suite, what is its culture all about. And that can be done by speaking to various people, talking to maybe forums such as these, which I think are a very good idea that allows students to connect with people in the professional world, get their insight, and maybe that helps them shape their future. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of MBAs are out there. And I joke around with my peers as well. I say, if I throw a stone, I'll get 10 CFAs or 20 FRMs. That's how much it is, right, in India. And that's why it's all the more important for them as an individual to decide what they need to do, what they want to do, and then to follow that passion.
Okay. And so any specific advice that you'd like to share?
For the students?
For the students, yes.
That's a bit of a tough one, but I would say, maybe just you follow your passion. I just come back to that because I think as me as an individual, that's something, and that can apply to all the aspects of your decision making. Right? Do something you like to do. Don't get into something just because other people may say it's great, or because there may be a lot of money in it. Because if you don't like it, you're not going to be motivated to get up. You're not going to do a good job, and in the end, it's just going to not work out for you or the employer. Why go through that trouble? Think about something that you're passionate about. Do your research, target those companies, and hopefully that clicks, and you make a career path for yourself on that basis.
Thank you so much, sir.
My pleasure. Wish you all the best.